Hey everyone, this is Curb Knight, bringing you my tier list for set 3. I guess we're kind of doing this regularly now, so let's go ahead and just get into it. Before we start, I do have to mention, I always forget to mention this, but shoutouts to Curly Haired Vanguard for making this tier list. Go give them a subscribe, a watch. I don't know what's the terminology for that, but anyways, enough rambling. Let's get into the tier list. We're gonna continue with our usual things. We have our S, A, B, C, and D. And then, of course, my personal favorite, the no one wants to play this, for all the decks that basically I don't have enough data to, like, give you a concrete answer. So I'm going to, like, give my honest opinion and then just say, okay, well, I don't know, maybe it's strong and nobody's just tried it. I feel like pretty much all meme decks fall into nobody wants to play this. So starting off with a meme deck, Triumph Dragon, should I even, like, rate these? I feel like it's not even worth it. Like, we can just throw all of these in there. They are not really that good. Like, Astrum apparently has some potential. We are getting new forms for them in Japan only, so those forms are much better. It's like, I don't think they're ever going to come to English, so these are just going to be forever. No one wants to play. Getting into, you know, our actual decks here. Let's see, Varga. Varga is still pretty strong, but I think that this issue that Varga has, nothing has really changed. It's kind of just hit a crit on your first drive check, or you don't do much. And if you do it, you feel great, and if you don't, you feel kind of like shit. It wins games sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. Enough times that I think it's a solid enough deck. Like, if you feel confident in your ability to high roll, sure, bring it. Gryandra? Is this right? Is that how it's spelled in English? I know you guys who if you're watching this video and you voted on that poll to force Orion to actually play Gryandra, shame on you, I guess. I don't even know what to say about that. That would have been really funny. You would have made him suffer. Gryandra, haven't really seen anything. I think I'm just gonna put it on no one wants to play, because not even Orion, the guy who loves playing all these janky decks, he doesn't want to play it, so that deck must not be worth anything. Vergilia is also no one wants to play. Cody Blaze I have actually seen. There is one person at one of the locals I go to that does play this deck, and I have played against him. I almost lost to it, but that's only because he hit a 6 damage OT. But, you know, it is a deck. It's semi-functional. It does things. It's just not very good at it. It doesn't do very good things is the big problem. Moving on to something that actually is good, of course, Shoji Doji. We're going to put him in Shoujo Doji tier. S for Shoujo Doji. Obviously, I'm still working on my how to beat on this. It will be out, I don't know, whenever I'm done with it, it will be out. Hopefully before the first BCS, which is coming in like 2 weeks. At least at the time of this recording. But yeah, Shoujo Doji, I think, is just uncontested best deck in the format. That being said, I will say that it is not as dominant as like something like Shiranui was. Like, Shiranui was so strong, so far ahead of everything else. You could even probably put like Jet in that category. I guess like the term would be tier 0. So Shoujo Doji is definitely not tier 0 material, but it is just, you know, the best deck in the format. Not a whole lot to say there. It's just, it is a very high skill intensive deck. You do need to know what you're doing. You can't just pick up the deck and be god tier. Although I will say the fact that the deck is so good, it kind of does carry a little bit. So, you know, mileage will vary. If you know what you're doing at Shoujo Doji, it's super easy to just like win against them. If you're playing a good deck and you know what you're doing, you have a decent chance at beating Shoujo Doji. It's probably like the best way I can say that. But yeah, it's still best deck. Andrel might be in B tier, I would say, if it weren't for the fact that Shoujo Doji is on top. So Andrel gets put back down to C, just because this matchup is so absolutely fucking garbage. Basically, like, this relies on its bind zone, and this removes the bind zone of your opponent. So moving on, Blagdemire. I think Blagdemire is, I'm convinced putting it into A or B. Maybe we'll just put it like at the bottom of A, because it's still just a very strong deck. Like, it does a lot of strong things, like neutralizing the Vanguard, getting the crit, Sentinel restrict, a fuck ton of power on the main line. But of course, you know, it has like so many weaknesses, which is just like, I made a whole like 3-minute video on it. But it's really not as powerful. Like, you can definitely lose just like randomly to Blagdemire. So, you know, you watch out for it, but just know your matchup and you should be fine. Lukier, the new one, Venus Lukier, definitely a lot stronger than original Lukier. I'm not entirely sure. I haven't really played too much against Lukier. I haven't really seen it being played. I know some people are playing, including my, shout out to my teammate Joshua for piloting this deck exactly once for the Constructed Cup tournament and never again. But it is an okay deck. It's definitely solid enough. I don't know if it's solid enough for B tier though. Maybe I think I think I'll put it at top of C for now because I don't really have a good gauge for it. I don't know if it's strong enough to like beat these decks though. Like the same thing it feels like the same power level as Lukier, but better, if that makes any sense. Being power crept doesn't really do as much for the deck as it should, I think. Sacrifice Glass. Sacrifice Glass is a very fun, very funny deck. I've piloted it once, but according to my teammate, it is a very fun deck to play. But once again, these two decks use the bind zone, and the top deck happens to be something that gets rid of your bind zone. So that kind of does nerf it down to C tier. It's a solid enough deck. It takes forever to get set up, and it gives your opponent an advantage, but it also has a fuck ton of retire, so if you're playing any rear guard centric decks, Sacrifice Glass really does really mess with your strategy a lot. Rezile I think is probably still strong. I struggle, maybe put it above. No, I'll just fucking put it above Blagdemire. And honestly, probably just above Varga because it's a lot more consistent of the deck. You can be a really good Rezile pilot. You have things like the hostage package, the set order package that does a lot for the defense of the deck. And it is still just like a very grindy deck that can keep up its resources, which is something that you definitely need when you're going up against something like Shoujo Doji. Leo Amatora, I have played against this deck once exactly and lost to it once exactly because I got cocky and everything went right for them. But other than that, this is probably not as good as Androl in like a normal matchup. Probably not even better than Sacrifice Glass, if I have to be honest. We don't have the new support from set 5, I think it is. So, you know, nothing about... I don't really have enough to, like, gauge this. Mordelin Undercover, I don't have enough data on this. Westra, I think is still pretty strong. I don't know if it's A tier strong. I almost need to put this in No One Wants to Play This, because I haven't seen a single Westra at locals in forever. But I think the deck is still solidly strong. Like, it is just your aggro rush, which, you know, theoretically speaking, should have a good Shoujo Doji matchup, because if you can just rush the fuck out of Shoujo Doji, that is one potential way to beat the deck. But at the same time, like, Westra is a deck that doesn't really get that many resources, and then, like, going -3 from a Shoujo Doji turn definitely is not something a Westra player is gonna enjoy doing. So I haven't seen what that matchup looks like. I guess if you guys know it, you can comment it. But I'm just going to put him in B because I think the deck is still solid. It is also getting more support next set. So, you know, maybe that makes some difference. I'm not sure. The Westra has really fallen off in terms of just, like, playability in locals, I guess. Rotovisor. We finally got 2 new support cards, baby. But currently the deck is still D tier. There's so many things that I want to try to fix this deck, but every time I think about doing it, it just does not function. Just moving on, Dayusha I think is definitely a solid deck. Like, Restanding Vanguard, potentially 3 drives once. Sure is DP, swing, hit, crits, win. It can definitely compete. You can steal a lot of wins with Dayusha. I've been seeing a lot since it is a new deck. And it is fairly solid. Like, it does a ton of filtering, has powerful rear guards and a threatening vanguard. So it just has, like, all the really good things that are required. I almost want to put it, like, in A tier just because, like, it's another restanding vanguard and it is potentially pretty good. You know, I'll do Dayusha solid. I'll put it in A tier, even though it probably deserves to be in B tier. But, you know, at the same time, why not? Archite, I haven't actually seen very much Archite. I've seen like one person play it. It seems solid enough as a deck, but I think I don't have enough data on it, so I'm probably just going to put it in No One Wants to Play. Like, if you want to play this, if you want to devote yourself, you probably could beat a lot of the good meta decks, assuming you know your matchups. Valeno, I think... I'm going to put it in B for now. I haven't played this deck in forever. I haven't even played this deck with a new support from set 2. Set 2 support definitely makes the deck a lot more solid and grounded, gives you a lot more defensive and lastability. The problem I see with this is Valeno is definitely a deck that does not like retire. Like, this deck has Angel Ladder in it mandatory, not just, like, you know, because, you know, it's good to prevent your things from being targeted, but mostly because if you lose a lot of your rear guards here, you can't really always get them back. Like, yeah, you have Fiore to, like, search out your things. Yeah, you have the grade 2 that recurs pieces. Yeah, you now have the grade 2 that says Soul Blast 2, call something. But the problem with that is all those cards require resources. Like, Fiore, Counterblast 1, the grade 2, discard a card, the new grade 2, Soul Blast 2. You're going to run out of resources eventually. And Valeno honestly just does not have the power right now in order to being ripped of resources and at the same time getting 1 counter charge per turn. It's just not enough right now. I might even push this down to C just because Shoujo Doji is just, it feels like it'd probably be a very bad matchup. Yeah, I'll put it on top of C. Zorga Nadir is, definitely want to say this is an A tier deck. But I struggled to a little bit because the deck has completely fallen off since set 2, at least at my locals. I think the deck is still as strong as ever, like hitting with crit pressure. It doesn't actually care that it loses advantage to Shoujo Doji, so theoretically that's a decent matchup. But there's probably something else I'm not thinking of. I'm going to rank it at no one wants to play, but I think that Zorga is a very solid deck. It is a little complex to play, and you need to know your rulings, and you need to know what you're doing, and once again, you need to know your matchups. But Zorga definitely a solid deck, but I just do not have the knowledge set right now to correctly rank it. Strelagia, this deck is actually a lot of fun, and it is pretty solid, all things considered, but it is one of the decks that is very much a victim of the Stoicheia curse, which is it gobbles up resources like nobody's business, and the fact that Stoicheia is the nation with probably the second worst amount of like charging, I guess. Yeah, Strelagia is just gobbles up Counterblast, it gobbles up your soul, but it is fairly strong at what it does. Like, it goes, it is a go second deck, which, you know, is somewhat advantageous going into the Shoujo matchup. And I would say, like, it has a pretty decent Shoujo matchup because it can kind of just close out the game very quickly. The turn 3/4 of Strelagia is very scary because they scale in increments of 5 and they put you at 10. It can definitely beat you, but the problem is it runs out of gas very, very quickly. And it is also a deck that needs a lot of counterblast, so you are taking a lot of damage, which makes it hard to survive in the later game. Although, given the fact that the meta is super fast, with Shoujoji being the best deck. Moving on to some Lyrical, we have Chris Rain. Chris Rain, I have not seen anyone play. I think Chris Rain might actually be solid enough to be in B tier, just because Franchette and like all the support makes it a overall kind of solid deck. Like, it's somewhat complete. Like, yeah, we're waiting on the next set restander, but unfortunately I don't have enough data. I might try and play this now that the Mermaid ride line came out, because I want to try out, see how the deck feels. I feel like it's probably only gonna get better from there. Let's put her in no one wants to play for now, because no one wants to play this. Flomglom, my new love from set 2. I almost want to put it at B tier, but I don't think it deserves that. It is just a solid deck. It does what it wants to, and what it does is fairly solid things. This deck is really fun to play, though, but I don't think it's really strong enough. Like, it's very tanky, or it can be very tanky, but, you know, I don't think it really can match, like, the aggression of some of the top decks right now. This deck, I'm planning on building this. I did see another VanTuber, like, make a whole deck profile on this, which is pretty interesting, but this deck is super simple to build. All you need is a Ballista Ride line, 4 copies of the grade 4, and a start deck Lyrical, and you have the entire deck. I guess we can rank some of the new Lyrical stuff because the deck is coming out this Friday, at least at point of the time of this video. So I'm gonna rank some of these. Megiel is D tier, I want to say. Like, Megiel is a rush deck. If you go first with Megiel, you can swing face. You can go, if you get super lucky and you high roll, which Now this deck actually does have a lot of ways to high roll because it has a new grade 1 that basically just says CB1, EB3, check top 7, mill 1, add a 1 to hand. So you set up a lot of things. Megial scales in 5k to your front row. So if you're going first, that makes magic numbers against your opponent's grade 2. And then you have that grade 2 from set 4 that you put it into the soul. And now you can call 2 things, give them both crit. And if you happen to mill both of your restanders, you can have 5 attacks with 4 of them being an extra critical, which is, you know, if you don't guard all those, you're fucking dead. That is like 7 damage on board. So, you know, Megial definitely is a deck that can randomly OTK people if you're not prepared for it, and you go second. So watch out for Megial. She can kind of be a threat, but if the game goes on too long, she just runs out of gas. Lillifa, if any of you saw my streams back then, Lillifa is kind of fun to play. It's not as bad as it used to be, but it's still not a very good deck. Next up, Hazoret. I'm going to put this as far bottom as I can do. In fact, this one is going to be Hazoret. How do you spell Hazoret? And Hazoret is going to get her own tier all by herself because I unironically think that Hazoret is like the worst of the new lyrical ride lines. She just doesn't have what it takes right now. Michu I think is solid. Once again, I don't actually have enough data to support this other than like JP results, but I think Michu is definitely going to be a solid deck. A if not B, but I'm gonna have to put it in no one wants to play this for now, even though there's like 3 people I know that want to play this. But I think the deck is solid enough. Do I put it there? No, I think I can give her at least a B, B plus kind of area. I've seen what the deck does, like in proxies, but is it strong enough to compete with everything? I don't know. It remains to be seen whether Michu is good enough to like hang with the rest of these fellas over here. Next up, Kyoka. Kyoka, I've been playtesting with some proxies. The deck is very solid. Like, it's a very good rush deck. You can commit all of your pieces to board, and then you basically just recuperate all the resources that you committed. It has multi-attack, very strong. Grade 2 triple rare that I got in the set is actually very solid. It's a multi-attacker, and it's not grade 3 restricted, so you can... There's a ton of filtering, a ton of adding. But I think the problem with this is the same problem, and ironically, that a lot of Suikoden decks have, that you do kind of brick on orders, and sometimes that can lose you the game. You don't make a lot of like good advantage or shield value, so sometimes it can be really neg if you kind of low roll with Kyoka. Lutetia, I've heard that Lutetia is going to be very strong. It is another restanding Vanguard, but it is also a turn 4 deck now. But that turn 4 is also very powerful. Right now, I'm going to have to put in no one wants to play this because I don't have enough data. You could argue maybe I should wait till this stuff comes out so I can actually rank it better. But, you know, I need to get content out now. BCS is out. Sagitta. So... one of my teammates wants to play this deck. I think the deck is solid enough right now. Is it actually strong enough to like be a competitive deck? Probably not. Yeah, I will say that it's a playable deck as opposed to something like this or, you know, something like this. I don't think this deck is actually very playable. Just reading the cards, it doesn't really sound that good. The only thing it really has going for it is like the old Prism support, which is like, I think you'd rather play Pacifica at that point. So I'm actually going to put her in Hazoret tier for now. Coral I've been messing around with. I'm working on the deck build. I'm going to put in C for Coral tier. Deck it has a lot of good things going for it, but I think that Coral is suffering from the same problem as Flamglom, which is there aren't enough names yet. Like, my deck build is currently maxing on every single Coral, including the starter. And I feel like that's the best we can get right now. At least your grade 0s are 10k shield, so it's not terrible. We don't have new Eugene yet. Bob Sagura, no one wants to play. This is not real. Dope, also just not real. Jiva, probably a solid deck, like maybe around B tier, but at the same time, you know, I love negging too. This is not a real deck. Let's see. Gandiva does actually have a lot more support now, but it is still on the ban list for whatever reason. So, yeah, sure, Gandiva, you can be with the rest of the boys in C tier. Honestly, that might be selling Gandiva a little bit short. It still is definitely solid. You know, you could potentially have 5 attacks. You got the new support, the promo, and the grade 2 triple rare. which are both very solid cards, and of course it's getting another card that is fairly solid in the next set. Tamiyura, I don't really have enough data. Like, it is another rush deck, and fun fact for all of you, did you know that Shoujo Doji's best attacker, Unprecedented, is also a Tamiyura card? That is the fun fact of today's tier list. Vermilion, the only one playing this is Orion, and he seems to be having a lot of fun with it, but I don't really think it's good enough to be tiered. Is this another Youth Quake? It is definitely Youth Quake, so that's not really getting tiered. Shiranui, I think, is still as strong as ever. One thing I didn't mention is that both of these decks actually just did get hit on the last product stream, so they're going to be definitely being a lot weaker going into the next couple of sets whenever we get the ban list, which for English probably won't be until next year if I had to guess. But Shiranui is still definitely a solid deck. I think the biggest problem with it, why Shoujo Doji takes its spot now, is because Shoujo Doji does a lot of rushing, and guess what? Shiranui doesn't like rushing, and guess what? Shoujo Doji does a lot of retire and removal, and that's another thing that Shiranui doesn't like. So Shoujo Doji does a very good job at kind of countering Shiranui in a lot of ways. It is still definitely probably a winnable matchup, just because Shoujo Doji is not nearly as overpowering as Shiranui is and was. But, you know, they're still both pretty strong decks, but Shiranui is definitely not favored in that matchup. This is another Orion deck. Barrow Magnus is not a real deck. Yeah. Bruce, also not a real deck. This and this are not real decks. Let's go ahead and skip over some more. This deck is not real yet. With the new support, it'll be okay. This, I know I gave this a pretty high ranking, but since then, I haven't seen anyone play it. Chaos, I always like ranking high because it is also very much like a Blagdemeyer dot deck. But I'm gonna give it a B tier for now, just because I have not seen. I'm honestly not gonna. I'll put it above Kyoka though. I definitely think it's more powerful than Kyoka. And I think this is probably like that. But Chaos still does the same thing. You know, go turn 3, kill them if you can. It's still Chaos. Still be chaosing. Anyways. Getting into an actual deck, Chronojet. Chronojet, I think, is still a solid deck. I was just like thinking about this today. Both Chronojet and Messiah, wherever he is, here he is. I think Messiah is also a solid deck. I feel like both of these decks are very similar in a lot of ways. So they're obviously our first Stride deck sets. But the biggest problem with these two decks is that they haven't gotten any direct support to their strategies in a very long time. Like, most of their direct support has been from the promo, and all the other support is in the product itself. So they're kind of they're kind of forced to work with cards that are like a year or 2 years old, and they have to play them at like multiple copies. Like, they have to do that. And because of that, the whole rest of the deck that isn't those few support cards that are like 2 years old is just the staple generics of their respective nations. Dark States, definitely Jet is a little bit favored, but the only reason Jet is favored over Messiah is just because Dark States has more solid generics than Bronkgate does, and also Jet doesn't have to rely on set orders like most of the Bronkgate support usually does, which is something, you know, Messiah has problems with. You know, it can't use every single piece of Bronk support, whereas Jet can pretty much just use every single Dark States support card. But yeah, these decks, up until this point, have been living and dying on their nation's generics, and that has just kind of pushed their playability. And as long as the good generics keep coming in, then these decks will be playable. So that's what I have to say about the first two Strike deck sets. Greedon has not seen any play. This has not seen any play since like set 12. Dragold is honestly just too slow of a deck. I almost want to put it above these other ones, but that doesn't feel right. Like, do I put this below Sacrifice Glass? Maybe, just to be funny. But Dragold definitely has fallen off a very, very hard. Like, the meta has just sped up too fast. Like, if you get to your Dragonoids, it's still pretty powerful, but a lot of decks have a lot more shield value. It's a lot more livable. It's just not as good as it was before. This isn't real. Yesterday someone at Locals was playing this, but I don't think they went too far. This is this Minerva. I'm surprised no one has tried playing around with Minerva. Like, I am almost tempted to play around with Minerva, because I think, like the deck's the same, right? Nothing's changed. Nothing got hit. You only got better cards. You've got more generics. Things got, like, Biscotti. I guess you could play set order. You could play order package, although I don't think that's a good idea. But you have Cellgown, I guess. I don't know how much that does for the deck. But, you know, Cellgown do be Cellgown. But I just surprised no one's wanted to experiment with Minerva at all. I got a new card in set 3, which is, I don't really think it's that good, but I'm surprised no one's experimented with this, so I have no data on that. This doesn't function. This is a very fun deck. I did see someone do a deck profile on this, which is very drastically different than mine, and I really like their deck profile, so I might end up trying it out with a couple of my own changes. But yeah, Slurrin is a very fun deck to play. I love swinging, scrying 2, calling 1, and then calling 2 off the top 5, and then scrying another 2, and then another 3. It's just so much fun to, like, check the top of your deck like 5 times before you even do your drive checks. It is just very funny. Thegoria, I don't want to think about. Azel, I've been messing around with the new card. The new card definitely does feel very solid, but as funny as it is, I don't think Azel is going to be, like, really strong this meta. I'll keep messing around with him. There'll probably be some Azel videos on the channel at some point, but I think Azel, the new card is very solid. It does change the way the deck works. I just want to play around with this deck a little bit more, see if I can break it. But I don't, even if I do break this, I don't think it's going to be any higher than C or B tier. Bastion, no one has played this. This is not New Alden. Youthberg, I think Youthberg is still kind of a solid-ish deck. It is a very OTK, kill your opponent as fast as possible. In a lot of ways, it kind of does feel like worse Blagmire. Next up, we have Luard, and I think Luard is still a solid-ish deck. Luard, I think it's still a solid deck, but is it best deck? Probably not. Honestly, like, Messiah is probably not best. Probably doesn't even deserve to be an A tier, if I'm being completely honest. Luhan, I haven't touched. This, I also haven't touched. Seraph Snow. So, whether you decided to take the Seraph Snow versus Shoujo Doji matchup thumbnail video as a joke or for real, I think that there is a lot more nuance to this matchup. If I'm gonna, like, go back and retcon history, this matchup is very dependent. Like, I think that if you're a Prison player and you know what you're doing against Shoujo Doji, and the Shoujo Doji player doesn't know what they're doing, they're gonna get curb stomped by Prison. But if the Shoujo Doji knows they're playing what they're doing and Prison doesn't, then they're gonna get curb stomped. I also think if Prison is playing a more field control based build, they're going to get curb stomped by Shoujo. If a Pure Light deck is focused around imprisoning from drop and from hands, using that one grade 2, it definitely can beat out Shoujo Doji potentially. But Prison has to do a lot of things. They have to grind out the game. They have to push Shoujo to 4 by that turn 4, and then they have to swing like 4 times with double crit. Yes, Prison does technically give revival to Shoujo Doji. Yes, Shoujo Doji can do a good job of clearing its board, but if Shoujo Doji doesn't see those Kinrans, if they don't see the kunais, if they can't countercharge and get like 2 soul from just swinging, then it is definitely within the realm of possibility that they instantly run out of resources and get curb stomp clapped by Prison. But all that being said, Prison's matchups for like everything else seem kind of mediocre. Like, none of this really cares too much about Pause. Like, this cares a little bit, but not as much, because that technically gives it revival, which is something that Messiah does need a little bit. And then you can always just imprison like a Makani and then call the Makani and then put the call Makani back to soul, and you basically just got it for free. So yeah, you just get free Prison from that. Honestly, Makani just really does fuck with Prison. I think I might even put it at the bottom of B, because it does match up pretty poorly into a lot of the other decks. Like this, Prison will absolutely shit on this deck, assuming that it lives that long. But yeah, that's what I have to say on Prison. Heroes used to be so great, but now we have a new hero. I think the deck is still solid. Like, you can still rush, like, beat people down quickly. That's kind of what the meta is. This is not real. I have not tried Avangarda. Maybe it's solid. Who knows? Ava has really fallen off in our locals. I don't think we really see anyone playing it. Gonna go ahead and just put it in B tier because I think the deck is still solid. It still does everything, but everything is getting just that little bit stronger. Also, Shoujo, you can technically like get rid of their 10k intercepts, which is no bueno. Yeah, Silhouette is not a real deck. It got new support. This, no one's playing this. No one is playing this. Orion is playing this, or at least he did. We're working on our Maelstrom build. No one is playing this. There's one person playing this, but it is still a very silly deck. Rowa, no one playing this. I hate this deck. Alright, so let's get into some mags. My favorite part of the video, as always. So mag, grade 4, I think is still very strong. I'm going to put it in B tier. I'm going to put it below Luard. But mag, it's just a toolbox deck. And guess what? There is a card that counters Shoujo Doji called Sure Kill Machine... What's it called? And that happens to be a grade 2 or greater card that you can recycle with Inglarv. So theoretically, you have a very good matchup into Shoujo Doji. This deck also does completely shit on Shiranui, and you know, it's a decent matchup against pretty much everything else. It is very solid, but the problem with it is you need to mid-roll every single game, and if you low-roll, you just kind of auto-lose. Masks, I think I'm going to rank this. I tried playing this deck again, and it is absolute garbage doo-doo, because you have to commit so many pieces. Like, the deck is all set up for like a mid payoff. Like, why are you doing that? Don't believe the naysayers. I've played both of these decks. This deck feels leagues better than Magnolia Masks ever has. Next up, another Stoicheia deck. Leonor. Leonor is definitely like one of the most solid decks that I can say right now. That's you can take that shit to the bank. I won a shop challenge. Sure, it was only like 23 players, but I beat 2 Shoujo Doji players with Leonor, but Leonor definitely is just like an actual strong deck. We got Alvina. Alvina, very strong with the deck. You can change the build. You can play machine gun, fire, whatever it's called, sure kill, to counter this matchup. Technically works against this matchup, and that matchup, and this matchup, and this matchup, and this matchup. This one too, but it doesn't work against this. So, still a solid deck. Always going to be very good. Probably has the best staying power out of the big 3 from set 13. Kairi, I want to say Kairi is still a very solid deck, but it is still missing some things. But, you know, there's a lot of Kairi's videos on the channel. Check them out if you're a doubter of Kairi. Kairi is still definitely, like, a solid deck. This is not a real deck. I'm going to try this again because we did get new support in set 1. This does not exist. Willista... I tried out Willista. It does not feel as strong as it used to. That is without the new support card. I'm going to try Willista again. I have like 5 fucking lyrical decks to try with this new set. So I'll share the results later, probably the next tier list. This doesn't exist. This deck makes me angry. This deck also makes me angry. This deck I might try again with the new support, although I don't really think you play any of it. Sharma, I'll give a quick shout out to my hermano. For Sharmat. Sharmat, I think, is probably either bottom of B. Yeah, let's give it bottom of B. I'll put it above Prison because I hate Prison. But Sharmat, solid deck, does solid things. The problem is top tier, sometimes fucks with it. But if you hit those 60k columns, you can't, and they don't have the PG, hit the crit, just win. Got 3 new support cards. 2 of them are garbage. One of them is actually really good. Dude, this isn't real. This does not exist. And our last deck, Labrador, is has not been played by anyone in a very, very long time. Training equipment. I'll add training equipment because I play that deck. I guess our last one, we got to end it with Mushi King. Mushi King still does what it wants to do. It got Alvina, which is pretty good. So, you know, you could play Mushi King, or you could just not. You know, that's always a solid option. Alright, so I think that is going to do it for our tier list. So obviously, like, I think Shoujo Doji is probably best deck format right now. It is not unbeatable, but it does a really good job at countering a lot of the other decks. Like, do I even need to say anything else about Shoujo Doji? It's just best deck right now. But of course, you know, you have A tier, which is solidly behind it. And then you've got B tier, which are still pretty solid contenders. You got C tier, which is like, if you really want to try hard, yeah, you can maybe make it work. And then D tier, if you're just there, if you're just going to regionals to fuck around, play a D tier deck. These decks, like I said, I don't have enough data on them. which, you know, might speak to their playability. And then, of course, you have Hazoret here. But that is going to be it for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to do things, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.